as UPA celebrates its 9 years in power, beginning from 2004 to 2013. This perhaps is the last report card which the Prime Minister and the UPA chairperson will be coming out, because next year will be elections. And to talk about the 9 years of UPA, we have the Union Minister for Information and Broadcasting, Mr. Manish Tiwari. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us.
Thank you, Sanjeev. And first of all, may I congratulate you for the excellent TRPs that you've been getting over the past month and a half. I believe even in the cable and satellite category, Doordarshan and especially Primetime News has been competing with its peers in a very aggressive manner.
Thank you very much. What about the TRPs of the government, sir?
Well, I think if you evaluate the performance of a government, you need to step back and take a long view. So therefore, whenever you try and benchmark the performance of a government, you do it on 5 parameters: on political stability, on social cohesion, on internal security, on economic development, and international relations. And I think if you take a long view over the past 9 years, the UPA government has measured up fairly well. Yes, there have been difficulties, there have been problems, there have been issues on which action at times was required, and the government has acted both firmly and decisively.
But the big ticket achievements, I know there's a big report card coming out, but the 5 points that you'd like to maybe highlight?
Well, I think importantly, if you were to reflect on the past 9 years, you would find that the rights-based entitlement programs of the UPA government have today taken root. You have in place an architecture which provides free and compulsory education for children between the age of 6 and 14 years. You are moving in the direction of providing food security to 67% of the people of this country. So I mean, I can go into each area in greater detail, but I think importantly we've been able to balance the twin imperatives of equity and growth.
And the BJP, the principal opposition party, they have come out with their counter report card, so to say, on your anniversary day. Now they have come out with 4 major points. There's a big press conference, but their first point, or one of the 4 points was, okay, the Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh, is the Prime Minister, but according to the BJP, not the leader of the country, because there is a dual center of power and there's a battle of one-upmanship between the government and the party.
First of all, find this preemptive press conference fairly strange, for the lack of a better word. I can understand that after the UPA had presented its report card, if the principal opposition party would have critiqued it. But before even waiting for the report card to be put in the public space, or the report to the people being put in the public space, you shoot from the hip. I think that is completely unstatesmanlike, but then that is something which is expected of the Bharatiya Janata Party. And I find this argument to be very strange, because here is a party which believes in collective leadership. And the UPA has demonstrated a very coherent model of collective leadership over the past 9 years. So I find this very surprising that a party which used to accuse us of being patriarchal, which used to accuse us of being top down, driven by a particular individual, now finds fault with even the model of collective leadership.
But this constant targeting of Prime Minister, this is only, they are just raising the rhetoric on this issue over the past few months, if not, they did it in 2009 also, to be very honest, but they have become more vitriolic, if you may, more direct, more personal.
Well, I think it's a case of believing in your own propaganda. First of all, you spread a canard, then you perpetuate it through insinuation and calumny. Then you start believing in your own propaganda, then raise a ghost and slay it and say that you're Superman. So it's extremely unfortunate that the Bharatiya Janata Party has started believing in the myths they have been perpetrating and perpetuating over the past 9 years.
The other argument, or the other charge, if you may, they put out in their press conference was that this UPA 2 is perhaps the most corruption-tainted government in India's history.
Well, it hardly lies in the mouths of people who lost Karnataka, who lost power in Himachal Pradesh, who lost power in Uttarakhand on issues of corruption and malgovernance, to be really accusing the UPA government. And if you look at the past 9 years in a perspective, whenever there has been an issue which has come out in the public space, which required stern and resolute action, both the Prime Minister and the chairperson of the United Progressive Alliance, Mrs. Sonia Gandhi, have stepped up to the plate and have taken action.
And also they have charged the UPA government with compromising and subverting of institutions. And of course, they list out all the usual suspects, CAG to CBI.
Well, I find this to be extremely strange that a party which used all the instrumentalities of governance to go after a media organization called Tehelka, when they had the gumption of exposing their president on taking bribes on candid camera, is really accusing the UPA of undermining institutions. In fact, each institution, if you pick up, we followed the same selection process which was followed by the earlier NDA government, or which were followed by governments even before that. So therefore, I think it's a sign of desperation. It's a sign of extreme nervousness that you do not even wait for the government to really present its point of view on its anniversary, and before that try and torpedo it, by shooting unguided missiles from the hip.
And without wanting to take sides, it's also, don't you think it's also sort of bad for body politic? It's not establishing any kind of good precedence. I'm not trying to take your side, but
well, I don't know, because if you really look back over the last 9 years, you've had repeated disruptions of Parliament. You have had Parliament being held to ransom on one issue or the other. And I completely agree with you, because today the challenge is that there are about 200 districts in this country in which democracy or democratic institutions face a challenge from the forces of left-wing extremism who do not believe in the democratic paradigm. And then you have this democratic system in the middle, which has been made dysfunctional primarily by its own stakeholders. And then you have an increasingly cynical, for the lack of better word, quote-unquote civil society, which is also getting exasperated because institutions of representative democracy, and I'm not talking about the central government alone, even the state governments or state legislatures are not working. So I think, you make a fair point that people who are stakeholders in the democratic process, need to wake up and realize that if they keep on subverting democratic institutions, then possibly, we are heading up a street which is really a street of no return.
Mr. Tiwari, it's very interesting that both you and Mr. Jaitley earlier in the day used the same words in completely different contexts. You earlier in the interview said that you start believing in the propaganda if you keep repeating it. He said that in connection with your campaign of India Story, Bharat Nirman. You say cynicism. He said atmosphere has never been more cynical, pessimistic, negative. So just think of the ordinary Indian. You are the two principal parties.
Well, I think, you have a very strange paradigm whereby you have a certain amount of civility in the private space, which unfortunately does not get extrapolated to the public space. And so therefore, I think if you go by the litmus test of people's perception having been tested at the hustings, it's really a case of the BJP, believing that possibly they are on the cusp of something which is within their grasp. But the reality is that both in 2004 and 2009, they fell victims to their own propaganda. 2004, it was India shining. 2009, they tried to make a virtue of telling the country that you have a very weak prime minister, and they were very resolutely snubbed by the people. So I leave it to your viewers to judge as to who really, is believing in his own propaganda.
And finally, both Sushma Swaraj and Arun Jaitley, leaders in Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, said that why this celebration? Today should be a day of introspection.
Well, precisely, I think today is a day on which the Bharatiya Janata Party should introspect as to why for 9 years, notwithstanding their disruptive politics, notwithstanding the entire air of negativism and cynicism which they have created in this country, they still continue to perpetuate it despite that model having been repeatedly rejected at the hustings by the people. So yes, you are absolutely right. Today is a day of introspection. It's a day of introspection for the Bharatiya Janata Party.
The other thing which is coming up in public space with this UPA 9-year report card is that why 9 years? Because you have not much to show in the last 4 years. Is that it?
Well,
That's why the 9-year report card?
Well, I think what is important is that when you evaluate the performance of a government, you have to evaluate it as a continuing paradigm. There was a lot of unfinished business of UPA 1, which got carried over to UPA 2, parts of which that I have enunciated. And there is still unfinished business of UPA 2. For example, the right to shelter, for example, certain other initiatives which we think are very important for the growth and development of this country. So I guess, when you make an evaluation, you have to make an evaluation in a context and holistically.
We interviewed one of your ministerial colleagues yesterday on our show, Shashi Tharoor, and he said one of the big problems, he of course listed all the achievements, but he said the biggest challenge is that we have somehow failed to manage the perception of things not being very hunky-dory, especially on the issue of probity in public life, corruption. Do you agree with that perception?
Well, unfortunately, you've had a situation whereby responsible institutions have thrown certain very sensational and unverified numbers in the public space. And when you have numbers which are mind-bogglingly humongous and which are completely unverified and mythical to say the least, hurled into the public space by a very responsible constitutional institution, then obviously, there is a certain amount of a perception problem. But then again, the litmus test of perception is really in the court of the people. And repeatedly over the past 1 year, despite every effort to vitiate the atmosphere, we have been vindicated in the court of the people. And I do believe that next year around this time, when we go into elections in 2014, people will continue to repose their faith and trust in us.
Is the Bharat Nirman campaign somehow an effort to change this perception? Or because a lot of people say that you are doing the same mistake of India shining, though you personally and the government is taking pains to separate the two, that was a shining story, this is the right story.
Well, I think that there is a discourse, which has played out across the length and breadth of this land over the past 9 years. The discourse essentially is with regard to entitlements, with regard to empowerment, and that discourse unfortunately completely falls off the table because of our obsession with the cut and thrust of everyday politics, which is so unique to 2.5 miles of Raisina Hill or to Beltway, if you were to compare it to Washington DC. So the India story is really an attempt to tell the story as it played out and try to mainstream it and make it a part of the concurrent discourse.
Now, Mr. Tiwari, this one will be a tough one, even for somebody who is so good at taking questions like you, or maybe I'm just being presumptuous. The Prime Minister, coming back from a recent trip, actually said that his term as UPA 3 Prime Minister, he'll cross the bridge when it comes. Today, a senior minister in the UPA government, Kamal Nath, has actually given an interview saying that Rahul Gandhi will be the UPA's candidate for Prime Ministership in 2014. Now, this is again a dilemma which the Congress faces.
Well, I think this is an issue on which we have articulated our position very clearly, and the position is that the Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh, is the Prime Minister of India. Mrs. Sonia Gandhi is the chairperson of the UPA. We have a young leader in Mr. Rahul Gandhi who has re-energized the ranks of the party. So therefore, we have a Trimurti, and this Trimurti will lead us into the next elections.
Thank you very much, Mr. Manish Tiwari. It's really a pleasure, like always, speaking to you.
Pleasure's all mine, and wish you all the best.